Welcome, I'm Jennifer Bourne, and I'm so glad that you're here. Today, we are talking about pricing projects without a clear scope of work. Now, in a perfect world, every potential client who contacts you about a new project would know exactly what they need. They'd have a clear scope of work, a requirements list, and they'd understand the costs associated with their requests. But perfectly educated clients is a rarity because perfectly educated clients are designers and developers, right? Otherwise, our clients don't build websites for a living. They don't read blog posts and they don't learn about web design and web development every day. They're not WordPress experts, nor should they be expected to be experts. Clients hire you because they're busy running their business, doing what they do best, and they need you to guide them through the web design process, to educate them on content strategy, website strategy, and web development when necessary, to put their business goals first, and to provide an accurate, honest, clear estimate of cost up front. Now, often the process of providing a web design quote is a process of discovery, like peeling back the layers of an onion to find out about requirements, objectives, expectations, to map out the final scope of work and project deliverables. Without enough information up front, providing a quote is tough because assumptions are made and educated guesses have to be made about the full scope of work, and that is never the best approach. Because if a quote is too high, you risk losing the project or losing the client. And if the quote is too low, then there's the risk of not being taken seriously or being second-guessed as to why your quote is so much different than the other quotes they got. When information is missing, it causes problems for potential clients as well, right? It creates this confusing gap between their expectations and the estimate that was provided. This gap can be really difficult to overcome, especially if the designer or the developer isn't really good at communicating their value or skilled at communicating the benefits of the solution they're pitching. Now, accurate website pricing helps designers and clients. When due diligence is done and a potential client works with you during the estimating process to provide as much detail and information as possible, the result is a clear, accurate, detailed estimate, and everyone wins. When designers and developers, they win because they're able to confidently deliver accurate estimates based on clear deliverables, timelines, and agreed upon scope of work. They also enjoy fees that are in alignment with their experience and their expertise. Clients win because they receive a clear, accurate estimate that explains the scope of work, what they will get, and at what price and when. This helps set expectations, dispel confusion, reduce revisions, and even eliminate future surprises. When you quote new projects accurately, you have open, honest conversation with clients, and you set clear expectations, website projects run more smoothly. There's less stress. You'll enjoy your work so much more, and your overall profitability will increase. But unfortunately, there are times when a client doesn't have answers to your questions, when not all the details, requirements, or obstacles are clear, when the prospect won't answer your question, or a simple request is far from simple. In all of these scenarios, it's easy to fall into common pricing traps and mistakes that can create stress, frustration, and conflict. Some of those mistakes made when quoting web design projects are: 1, not enough due diligence. As a professional, you can't just take a client's word on face value alone. There's so much more to the story a lot of the time. You have got to get the information you need up front. Because when you do, projects are more likely to skip those obstacles, right? If you don't have information, you might run into unexpected things that cause delays and require change orders, or things that are going to bring around hidden costs that were unexpected. The second mistake is focusing only on doing time, right? The time you're spent doing the work. So when someone asks you for a web design quote, it's easy to fall into that trap of, it's going to take me 5 hours to do that project. I'm going to quote for 5 hours of time. The problem with that approach is that it fails to take into account project management, email communications, meetings, phone calls, research, training, file prep, searching for stock photos, testing typography stacks, brainstorming, sketching, configuring plugins, whatever it might be. The third mistake is using should be pricing, right? I know you really want your clients to love you and you want to make the sales process as easy as possible. But this desire to make the sales process short and easy leads us to use that should be pricing in our estimates of, well, something like this should cost this amount of money, or something like this should cost that amount of money. And you're basing it off what you think it should cost instead of what it really does cost. These estimates are often much lower than they should be because they're based out of fear and not based in reality. So let's talk about how to deal with unknowns in pricing web design projects. 2018 marks 21 years of me working as a web designer and 13 years being an agency owner. In that time, I've pretty much made every pricing mistake that you can ever make, and I've learned some lessons along the way. These experiences are what allow me to now create accurate estimates. And now I'm going to share some of those lessons with you. I'm going to share the 4 kind of most common scenarios we encounter with potential clients when there's some unknown information. So first, understanding that rarely is simple ever simple. What seems simple to a client, like a basic 5-page website, can actually be quite complicated, especially when other external factors are brought into play, right? Especially when we're looking at things like technical debt. Technical debt is the problems that kind of come with an existing website that existed before you got involved, or a lack of branding, right? A simple web design project all of a sudden gets way more complicated if the client doesn't yet have a brand established. They have no logo or color palette. They have no typography established for their brand, and they need you to help them create all of that. If you encounter situations like these, there are a few options that you have, right? The first option is understanding where technical debt comes from. Like most technical debt, you discover during the go live because there's weird stuff in the hosting account that you didn't know about, or there's other sites in the hosting account that might be affected by the work you're doing, or there's a site in the hosting account that was hacked and the client didn't know it, or there's other issues. If you've run into things like this, one of the options you have in terms of pricing is flat rating the design and development of the site, but doing an hourly project for the launch or the go live of the website. This way, whatever you find during go live, you're taken care of because you're being paid for the launch by the hour. The second option is to offer a paid technical assessment to be completed upfront before you even quote the project. In a technical assessment, you review the existing website, hosting account, forms, and anything else going on with the site. At the end of the technical assessment, the client has a report of the findings. You have the data needed to provide an accurate estimate. And if the client signs the contract, you could apply the cost of the technical assessment to the full price of the website. The third option is to make sure that you try to think about every single thing that might affect the cost of the project and to ask the client lots and lots and lots of questions, right? Ask them about branding, content, imagery, opt-ins, forms. Ask them about everything that you can think of. You've got to be very clear in this case what is and is not included when you provide that estimate. And then things like brand design or email newsletter template design or business card design or other things that you know clients ask for, you could include them as add-on services in your estimate. This will establish the fact that they're not included in the core scope of work and sets the expectation that if they do need those services, they'll be done at an extra fee. Now let's talk about pricing work on existing websites. Sometimes you're going to receive an inquiry from a potential client who originally hired another company, and they're looking for a new partner. In this situation, before getting into an official proposal, pitch a discovery project with a set number of hours. Discovery projects allow you to see what's really going on the back end of the website, and it gives the potential client the ability to test the waters and see what it's going to be like working with you. At the end of the discovery project, the potential client has a report of exactly what was done, what was left to do, what you found, what recommendations that you have, how you propose you move forward, and the keys to a successful discovery project are to agree on a flat number of hours upfront for a flat fee. You outline the deliverables or the tasks that are to be completed and prioritize that list. During the discovery project, you have got to over-communicate and communicate as clearly as possible. Let them know what's happening, what you're finding, and how it will impact the list of deliverables. Then create a plan for what happens when the discovery project is over. This will help shape your future estimate. You also give a chance to establish boundaries and expectations and demonstrate your process and set the tone for the client relationship. Now, sometimes you're also going to have a lack of information, right? What happens when a client doesn't give you any information or won't answer your questions, or they answer your questions with things like, I don't know, I'm not sure, you tell me. It's really difficult to provide an accurate website estimate when the client doesn't want to give you any information, right? In this situation, give them some follow-up questions, right? If they respond with good answers, then you know that maybe they just need to be communicated with in a different way. Or if the website project is more complex, like a membership site, an online course, and an e-commerce site, and they really just don't know the answers, they're not trying to withhold information, they just don't know, then consider pitching a scoping project. In a scoping project, the prospective client pays you as a consultant to help them establish what the scope of work is, or to help them create the creative brief for the project. During a scoping project, the focus isn't on design and development, but identifying the constraints, detailing the requirements, and outlining the milestones and deliverables. It's all about planning the scope of work and defining the objectives. What success on the project would look like. At the end of a scoping project, one of two things is going to happen. You and your client either decide that you enjoy working together, and now that you have a clear scope of work, you're able to give them an accurate estimate and proposal of costs, or you decide during the scoping project that maybe that partnership isn't the best fit. And in this case, the client has that creative brief and the scope of work outlined that they can take with them to someone else to get a quote. Now, some prospects, they don't want to provide any information about their project. They leave important fields and inquiry forms blank. They can't or they won't answer your questions. They won't talk about budget. They object to a technical assessment. They don't want to do a discovery assessment, and they don't want to do a scoping project, but they still want an estimate and a timeline. They don't want to do anything, but they want you to give them a quote. So most of the time, these inquiries are ignored or deleted because it's a signal that the prospective client really isn't serious about their project anyway. Now, if you do happen to interact with one of these prospects, though, that demand a quote and don't want to give you any information, then you need to make an educated guess as to what the project scope is going to be based on your previous experiences, and then add in extra what if pricing to cover your time in case the worst case scenario presents itself. So in pricing the total unknown, you have to account for your time. Quote the potential client your hourly rate, give them a ballpark range of hours, track your hours, and bill them for the total. Or you can use a different approach. Right? You can consider using a three-pronged approach. You can evaluate the number of hours that you think it's going to be, evaluate the number of hours in a best case scenario, and evaluate the number of hours in the worst case scenario. And look at all three, find an average, and quote the project based on that average. Problem is, you still are probably going to be too low. If a client is this much of a pain in the butt and they won't give you any information, but they still want a cost, double or triple whatever you think it's going to be if you're going to still move forward and provide them a quote. But you might also want to consider just letting them know that they're not going to be a good fit. But with that said, here are some tips on communicating with your prospects. When communicating with prospects, Don't rely solely on email. Pick up the phone, schedule a Zoom meeting, jump on Skype, do a Google Hangout. You are going to gain so much more insight into your clients' feelings and attitudes about the project when you can hear their voice, see their facial expressions, and read their body language, right? Ask a lot of questions up front and keep asking those questions until you get the information that you need to put together that proposal. So don't be afraid to say, when you say this, what does that actually mean to you? Because it means different things to different people. Or don't be afraid to say, can you explain your thoughts behind that? Because I'm not quite understanding where we're going here, or why you want that, or what's driving that decision, right? Occasionally, a potential client might get like a little persnickety. They might get a little testy about you asking so many questions. If they do, make sure you let them know that it's important that when it comes to technology, that people mean very different things sometimes when using the same language. Share that your questions are there to ensure that everyone's on the same page and no incorrect assumptions are being made. Share with them that the goal here is to provide them the most accurate estimate possible. That way you can eliminate future surprises. Now, there are going to be times when it's better to turn a project down. If a client will not answer your questions, they will not speak with you on the phone about a project, or they're extremely difficult to communicate, consider turning it down and saying no to the project. Likewise, if the project isn't a great fit, it's often better to turn it down and refer it to another designer or developer who is a great fit. At Born Creative, for us to consider a project, it must be a match for our skill set, interesting and fun to work on, and it has to return a profit to the company. If we're presented with an awesome new project and there's one aspect of the process that we're not quite sure about, then we'll use it as a reinvestment opportunity for the agency to learn from. We'll invest some of our profit and our time into the project to learn something new. If the potential project has two elements that are new for our team, and we already have an existing relationship with an expert or a subcontractor we can bring in, then we'll still say yes, and we'll use that as a learning opportunity to boost our skills. But we don't have to feel bad about that with the client because we're bringing in an expert to handle it for them. Now, if there are 3 or more things about the project that are unfamiliar to us, then we pass that project on and refer it to someone else. One thing to know is that you should never increase the price of a project to accommodate your learning time. It's just not fair to the client, and it's not fair to the pricing, right? That's not why they're hiring you. The reality of pricing WordPress projects with unknown variables is that it isn't easy for anyone. Inaccurate estimates based on assumptions and guesses result in more obstacles, delays, increases in costs, and decreases in profitability. On the other hand, understanding how to price projects will create more successful client relationships, fewer surprises, and greater satisfaction. By taking the time to do the necessary due diligence upfront, asking a lot of questions, pitching a technical assessment, pitching a discovery project, or pitching a scoping project, you can mitigate the challenges that come with the unknowns. You can gain the knowledge that you need to provide clear, accurate website estimates that you and the client both feel great about. If you enjoyed this article, this content, this video, whatever it is, make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel and click that bell so you get notified every time there's a new video. Likewise, if you're not already receiving my weekly email newsletter packed with great freelance business tips and awesome curated lists of cool things I find online, then make sure that you subscribe. It's also how you can get free access, beta access, and early access to all of the content, courses, and webinars that I offer. So thanks so much, and until next time, have a great day.